Roger that. And do you have time for a few more questions, sir?
Yeah, I think I do. Yes, I do.
Roger that. And Dale.
Yes, sir. Dale Kissinger again from MilitaryAvenue.com. My question is on quality of life for the troops that are closing down shop right now. How are things going for them?
It really kind of it's a good question. It really kind of depends on where you are in the process. So, if you are on a base that is going to transition in less than say 20 days or so, your quality of life becomes, the word we use is expeditionary, and so your quality of life becomes a little more expeditionary. And then in those last couple weeks, I would even go so far as to call it austere. And so you're going to get your 3 square meals a day, and you're going to get a shower. But the meals, may not be the same kind of meals that U.S. military folks enjoy today. So the fresh fruit, maybe canned, or it may be a meal ready to eat, or that kind of thing. You're going to get your meal, but it'll be going down. And similarly, at some point, we have to turn off the mail service. And mail and the U.S. military have a great relationship that goes back very long, all the way back to the Civil War, people writing letters. But at some point, in order to make sure that we don't leave mail behind or mail doesn't get misrouted, we have to cease mail service to the service members, and then they'll reunite with that mail back perhaps when they get to Kuwait, or maybe when they get back to home station. But we're doing that mail thing in response, in coordination with the U.S. Postal Service, so that before someone can mail something in the States, they turn off that zip code, and then that way it doesn't show up and that we can't find the person that we're supposed to give it to. I'll just share a little bit with you. One of the questions I've learned to ask when I go visit folks, and that's kind of what I do for General Austin, is to go check on quality of life. Is one of my first questions is, how's the internet? How's the internet service here? Because if you want to talk about quality of life, for today's military members, it quickly comes down to internet service. That's their primary means of communication, and in many cases, it's their primary means of entertainment. And so that's one of the questions I ask. Fortunately, in Iraq, in most cases, the U.S. government doesn't provide the internet. It's become the province of local entrepreneurs who have reached kind of local agreements with these local sites, and so they are continuing to provide internet service right up until the last moment. So I'm fairly confident that our service members are able to maintain contact with their loved ones almost up to the end. I'm trying to think of other do you have any other specific questions about the quality of life?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. The communication with family so that they know what's going on, and the food would probably be big ones for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
And Walter, did you have another question?
I just want to pick up on one other point you raised about the adversaries taking advantage. Do you have any numbers? I mean, how many attacks have there been near transition day? And what about as material is leaving? I guess they're being convoyed out. Is there any data on the number of attacks that are still taking place?
Yes, sir. So in 2007, when U.S. forces were experiencing a lot of attacks, our daily attack average was in the neighborhood of about 165 attacks a day. And so today, our average daily attack rate hovers around 13 or 14. So more, obviously, than any country would want to have in their country, that number of attacks, and obviously a continuing danger to Iraqi citizens and more threats than they actually deserve in their history, but a significant reduction. I don't have any by base statistics that I can share with you, other than it has been our experience. We had some fairly significant attacks this summer, and they were within 48 hours of bases closing. You've probably heard about the IRAM, the improvised rocket-assisted motor attacks. Those happen near the transition dates for those bases. So that's kind of changed the way they operate, and we have, in order to protect U.S. service members, we have kind of made it an important part to keep our base transition dates between ourselves.
This is Lieutenant Colonel Finaro. I just want to say that I'm a public affairs officer, and it used to be at one time that the local units would put out a media advisory and invite local media to attend the base closures because that was seen as a sign of progress of our drawdown and keeping our promise to the Iraqis. And because of one significant attack with IRAM at Cobb Loyalty, we stopped doing that.
Sir, did that answer your question?
When you talk about 13 or 14 a day, is that throughout Iraq and not particularly just on our bases? I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's Iraq-wide, and the casualties involved with those attacks would involve Iraqi security forces and civilians as well. And in most cases, the casualties are for U.S. forces are the smallest component of those attacks.
If I could throw one more in, just on troops that are leaving, they fly to Kuwait and then home. And I guess the question is, there was a period of time when we were flying some of those troops to Kuwait and then to Afghanistan. Is there any breakdown about that?
That would be obviously the exception, and there are, the Secretary of Defense has established rules about how long service members will deploy for, and so it's normally 365 days. So, I mean, it's certainly possible that if there was a unit that was in urgent need in Afghanistan and they had time available, that the Secretary of Defense could, and he would be the only one, but he could direct them to move from Iraq directly to Afghanistan. I don't have any, I've been in this job since July. I don't have any recollection of that happening since I've been here.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
We have time for one more, sir. Dan?
Yeah, thank you. General, could you go over one more time, I'm sorry, that the numbers of equipment that you are either leaving or turning over? Because I've heard very different numbers from various different parts of your establishment. I mean, one estimate was that 2.4 million pieces of equipment were being given away. So yes, breaking this up into the total numbers of pieces and value, and or in the subcategories that you mentioned, the equipment transfers, the STEP, and so on.
Yeah, giving away is not how I'd characterize it, because really we're transitioning these bases back to the government of Iraq, and it's our earnest wish that they continue to use these bases for the security of the Iraqi people. And so you would want to give them a base that's capable of doing that. And so that's kind of what's happening here. And so basketball goals and things like that. But so it's really a business case decision, and each one of these comes down to what would be most cost effective for the U.S. government and the taxpayer. Does it make sense to haul this thing, and I have a figure that it takes about $40,000 to haul a 40-foot container from the midst of Iraq all the way into the United States. And so you've got to be pretty careful about what you do if you're going to commit that kind of money to haul something back to the United States. You want to make sure that when it gets there, you'll have a use for it. And so that's what we're doing. About 1.63 million items that we have retrograded since September of 10. We've got about 788,000 left to retrograde. About 31,000 items were redistributed through the Central Command area of responsibility, and of those, about 10,000 vehicles. Or no, that's 10,000 vehicles in addition to that. I mentioned the state governments, about 1,100 items. Those are bulldozers and little bobcat tractors and the jaws of life. About 1,100 of those have been transferred to state governments, usually at about half the value that they would have had to pay for it. And you can imagine how important that is to them with state budgets like they are. And then for government of Iraq items, these are things that they've kind of either purchased or the U.S. military has declared excess, and this is usually military equipment, green military equipment, about 25,000 items.
And do you know what the value of those items were, and what and how much the government of Iraq paid for any of them?
Oh, I have some of that, but not right in front of me. I will tell you, there's, at least I had this conception